It never fails. It never fails that when a podcaster does a podcast about a thing, that the subject of said podcast will invariably, at some point during that podcaster's career, during the length of the existence of said podcast, the subject of that podcast will drop information about 15 minutes too late.
That
Yesterday, what's that?
that's I was gonna say that's exactly what I was gonna say, Bill. You captured it perfectly because we had just finished Stadiacast. I went upstairs because I was literally drenched because of my stupid vaccination thing, and then I get a text message from you, get a text message from a friend. I see Twitter blowing up, and it's like, oh my god, couldn't we record it an hour later, and then this would have broken live while we were on the show?
Exactly, which would have been really cool, but that's not what happened. So for those of you who I didn't text, who didn't get texts from friends, who didn't pay attention to Twitter, you might be wondering, what exactly are you talking about?
Right.
And that's that yesterday on the show we were talking about that there was evidence that FIFA 22 is going to be released on Stadia, which surprised absolutely nobody. But then when they made the announcement that you could suddenly pre-order it, they had like this cool video where they were showing off this new technology, and they said this new technology is for next gen systems like the Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S, the PS5, and Google Stadia, and it's
Right.
not on PC and it's not on the last gen systems. And that's a big surprise because up until recently, what we have seen over and over again is that video game companies will release stuff, but the Stadia version will usually be a little less than. And I have been chalking that up to, well, they don't know what they're doing yet. They're still figuring out this new hardware. It looks like EA is getting a pretty good handle on this hardware. I mean, both Lloyd and I played a whole bunch of Madden, and that game runs incredibly well.
Right.
So I'm assuming that FIFA 21 ran pretty well, but this new tech that they have for FIFA 22 is only for next gen consoles and not on PC. And there's a lot of people that are mad about that, but we'll talk about them in a second. Lloyd, you want to explain this hyper motion technology, which to me sounds like buzzword nonsense, and I
Yeah.
don't know what to really think of it, but you want to explain what it is?
I think EA spent a bunch of money and said, "Hey Sega, can we buy your blast processing trademark?" Yeah, actually, no, that's not it at all. Actually, the hypermotion stuff is really cool from kind of like a data standpoint. So what EA has done is they're pairing machine learning and AI, machine powered AI, together to do a new animation system that they're calling hypermotion technology. And it's really cool when you realize that to get this working, they had to actually put people inside these suits, which I think they're called SENS suits, SENS suits, which are data tracking suits. They have dots on them for camera tracking, but they also do data tracking. So if people are bumping to each other, they can tell the velocity and kind of what happened. And they're motion capturing a bunch of football players, UK football, not American football or Canadian football, and taking all that data and generating a bunch of new animations for the game. So they're saying something like there's an additional 1,000 animations in the game, which is really cool. That's cool. But that's not the cool part. They're taking those 4,000 new animations and using hypermotion technology, the game can on its own while you're playing figure out different animations. So if the guy was going to step normally with his right foot, but then someone's doing a tackle, if you put your foot down, you're going to step right through their leg. So they can take some of the data that was captured or generate new data and come up with new animations on the fly. Very cool. And what I'm waiting for is like the crazy like Skyrim dragon that has like wings that are about a thousand miles long and stuff like that. But this is really cool, and it's leveraging machine learning. It's leveraging the power of next gen processors, but it's also leveraging Stadia Cloud, which just shows maybe how powerful Stadia actually is, which to me is very exciting as well.
Yeah, I think that, for most of us that have been playing Stadia regularly and pay attention to what happens with cloud gaming, I think that most of us probably already knew Stadia is pretty powerful hardware, even though we're not seeing that powerful hardware
Right.
really being taken advantage of, because most of the stuff is that we're getting are older games and ports.
Mhm.
As we start to get those newer games coming to this particular system, that's when we're going to start seeing the actual power behind Stadia. Let's talk real quick about why it's not coming to PC. And there's a couple of reasons why it might not come to PC, but I think the biggest reason, and I could be wrong about this, I have not been in the EA conference room. I did not get thrown out of the window for suggesting a good idea.
Sure.
Um, but my guess is that EA basically said, look, we want to be able to cast the widest net possible to get the game running on PC. And the number of people who have hardware that can probably accomplish this task is probably pretty minimal. So rather than put all of that effort into getting it running on all of the different kinds of hardware that we have out there, rather than supporting a billion different configurations of hardware, let's just not deal with that and put the game out with the old style animations. And that's going to make it so that the most people can really enjoy this game. And there might be some people who say, well, hold on, I bought a $3,000 computer. I want to be able to take advantage of this stuff. And to those people, I
Right.
say, I totally understand,
Right.
but you're an extremely small segment of the population. And so getting it
Right.
running on your hardware and getting it running on somebody else's hardware who also spent $3,000, but they put different money into different parts, that's a really tough thing to get around, because you
Yeah.
have different hardware than everybody else. The thing that Xbox and PlayStation and Stadia has is that all of the Xboxes are essentially the same. All of the PlayStations are essentially the same, and all of the Stadia stuff is essentially the same. And because of that, it's easier to make this stuff work on that. Did I cover everything there, Lloyd?
Yeah, yeah, I think that that could be part of it. There's also there might just be a high GPU cost for this new technology that they're using. So instead of putting out a PC version of the game that performs amazing, if you have a 3080, like an NVIDIA 3080 card somewhere in your PC, but then if you don't, saying, well, it's going to be just the old animation system. They just put out the old game, the last generation game. And it wouldn't be the first time that EA's done that with their PC ports. It's pretty common for some of the new features in a console version of, say, Madden or NHL or FIFA or whatever, to not come across perfectly when they do the PC port. So this isn't the first time I've heard of this. But yeah, it probably has something to do with they need more GPUs to run all that machine learning stuff that's in the background. Like some of the data that they were saying is the AI alone in the game can do 6 times more decisions when the game is running in real time. And that has some real GPU cost to run that number of calculations for your AI, and then also doing like the animation tweening that they do to move from one animation to another and all that other stuff. There probably just isn't enough speed on a lot of the PCs out there. So they're like, you know what? Instead of making everybody angry, let's by not having a card in your PC and forcing them to spend another $700 or whatever, let's just say this is going to be the last gen version on PC. Or all those people that have a brand spanking new 3080 in their PC, they can just play it on Stadia, and man, that stream is going to look so good.
Absolutely. It is. Look, it's clear to me that EA has done a really good job getting the Frostbite engine running on Google Stadia. If this game is running on the Frostbite engine, then I'm going to assume that it's going to look fantastic as well. And all of this, all the HyperMotion technology stuff sounds fantastic. We'll see if it
Mhm.
turns out to be something real, or if it's just, buzzwords like, you know, like blast processing, like you said
Right.
before. But
Right.
the big point here that I want to make is that we're seeing support from publishers on Stadia where they're like, look, if it was a dying ship, if it was a sinking ship, I don't
Right.
think that we would have seen EA put the effort into making sure that their or that their hypermotion that was I don't think that we would have seen them put the hypermotion stuff onto Google Stadia, because they would have just said, well, do we really want to put all that effort into it?
Right.
Here's why they did that, because you heard me say a second ago, hey, why should they put all that effort into it if they're going to only service a very small part of the population, of the gaming population? And then, obviously the counter to that is, well, Stadia has a really, really small user base, so why would they do that for Stadia? And my guess is the EA says there's a whole lot of people out there who can buy our game
Yep.
without having to buy an Xbox or a PlayStation or a beefy PC, and we're
Mhm.
still going to be able to sell them our game if they just have a decent internet connection. That's a lot
100%.
of wallets that we can reach into. And this is
Yeah.
what Lloyd and I have been saying on the show since we started it 100 and whatever episodes ago, that the reason why, at least I'm speaking for me, the reason why I think that cloud gaming is absolutely the future, and why publishers are going to support it in the future, whether or not they currently do, is because it gives them way more wallets to reach into. And
Yep.
whenever you talk to the suits, that's what they want to know about. How many customers can we get? Right
Right.
now, the number of people who play games on Stadia is pretty small.
Mhm.
I can totally admit that. But that number's only going to go up, especially as people get their hands on it and realize that it works really, really well.
Yeah, exactly. And more to a point that we talked about on this week's episode of Stadiacast, there's people that only buy a new console for sports games.
Hmm.
Now these people can just buy a new TV that has a Google TV built into it, or use their current TV that has Google TV built into it. Pick up a controller if you have an Xbox Series controller, you have a PS4 controller, if you have a Stadia controller, and they can play the next generation version of FIFA without having to outlay $500 on a PS5 if you can find one, $400 on an Xbox Series if you want to get an S or an X. They can just buy the game on their TV, play the game on their TV, play the next gen version on their TV without buying a console. No console purchase necessary. This is kind of the gaming utopia that we've talked about forever. The one console future where you just everyone would have the same box and you could play any game. Well, we didn't know when we were talking about the one console future that the console is the 55-inch plasma TV or LCD TV that you just bought that has the console built right into it. Like this is going to be amazing, and the growth market for EA for FIFA is now huge. Every single person that owns a Google TV device, Android TV, Google TV, if you have a Chromecast, if you have anything that can capture a web stream, if you have an Xbox, even you could buy the next generation version on Stadia and play it on your Series S or on your Series X when the browser comes out. Having everything live in the cloud, which is essentially just a web stream, opens up this game to so many more people. And you got to think that that's where EA is thinking. They're thinking, okay, future growth, obviously next gen, but let's give the cloud people a taste of what we're doing in next gen, and see how many of those people will convince to buy this version of the game instead of buying the same game on their PS4 or their Xbox Ones. Let's see if we can convince people to buy the Stadia version and play it on their televisions or any other Chromecast device that they have. This could be huge. It'll be really interesting to see what happens at launch. But if nothing else, this shows that EA is all in on Stadia. Releasing this version on Stadia isn't an easy thing to do. This required a lot of work to get this working on Stadia, I'm sure, and they wouldn't put this work in unless they had a plan, either for a lot of sales or building a future market that is going to generate a lot of sales.
I will say this. We all seem pretty hyped about a game that neither Lloyd and I are very excited for. But I
Right.
will say this. I'm going to throw a wrench into the works here. I'm going to be negative Nelly here for just a moment. Nobody's going to care if they don't have crossplay, because right
Right.
now the number of people who play on Stadia is very small.
Yep.
And if you want to play Madden on Stadia, you better schedule it with somebody, because finding a random match is kind of a hassle. It's been a problem in multiplayer games on Stadia that don't have crossplay
Right.
since the beginning. Now, over time, that's going to abate. That's going to get better. But right now, it's absolutely an issue. And I don't believe the EA has said anything
No.
about being able to do crossplay with this. And,
No.
we've talked about this before, where EA, I can't remember the exact quote because I didn't plan on talking about this, but I can't remember the exact quote, but somebody at EA said something along the lines of, well, you can't do this without doing that. And you and I had the reaction at that time of, there's no way that they would say that if they
Right.
weren't planning on implementing crossplay. But
Exactly.
if they weren't planning on implementing crossplay, this would have been the best time to announce that. And they didn't
Mhm.
announce that, as far as I know.
Yeah.
What
The
are your thoughts there?
100%. I think crossplay definitely is going to be a future thing that EA is going to work on. I think possibly we'll get some information on Tuesday for that Google event where they're going to talk about new development things. Maybe Google's working on server farms for multiplayer video games. Like, there's so much stuff that Google can do for the gaming industry that is kind of thinking outside the box stuff. They already sell, like, they Amazon AWS does computer rentals essentially. So does Microsoft. Google does it to some extent. But what if they can say, okay, you bring your game to Stadia, and not only can you sell games to people on our amazing platform, but you can run your servers on one platform, and then if you make it multi-platform, every other version of the game can connect to it. And our servers are super fast. They have low latency between nodes. They can get into all the technical mumbo jumbo jargon stuff that they want. But maybe that is a future, and maybe that is what EA is waiting for. Of course, that's probably not anything that is going to happen, but them waiting until a future point, maybe FIFA 22 is that future point, and maybe it's with help from Google. We'll know in the future, I'm sure. But man, I'm super excited that we're getting a next gen version of a game, because I'm so used to all the fights that happen saying it's totally the next gen version, and then you see that it's definitely not the next gen version.
All right, let's end this video with a question to everybody out there. Are you picking up FIFA 20? I'm going to ask a couple of questions, so answer them in the comment section down below, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, go to nerdnest.tv, subscribe, click the bell, all that stuff, and then answer this in the comment section down below. Question number 1, are you picking up FIFA 22 on Google Stadia? Question number 2, do you think, since we're talking about EA, do you think that the version of Madden that we're going to be getting, Madden 22, do you think that version is going to be the next gen version, the same version that is on the Xbox Series X and the PS5, or is it going to be the last gen version? Because we're in a cross gen period now. Is it going to be the same version that's on the Xbox One X and the PS4? That's my question to all of you. Lloyd, play us out.
All right, thanks Bill. Thanks everybody for coming out and checking out this video. I'm excited about this. I might not be excited about the actual video game, because everyone knows I'm not a huge soccer fan in video game form. But man, I'm going on way too long, Bill. So you're going to cut all this junk out, and I'm going to make it a lot shorter, I think.
All
is
right,
what's
instead, I'll play us out. Ted Lasso season 2 is coming up, which is all about football. All right, so watch that.
Wonderful.
Because it's awesome.
Great show. Take it easy, everybody.
Bye.